Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Karen Weaver. My guest today is President Brad Mortensen, who serves as the 16th president of Utah State University. Brad oversees a comprehensive land-grant institution with more than 28,000 students, a statewide campus system, and a full portfolio of academic, research, and operational responsibilities. Among those responsibilities is direct oversight of a Division I athletics program that's in the midst of major transition, leaving the Mountain West Conference at the end of this academic year and transitioning to the newly reimagined PAC-12 conference. We know there that the president plays a very central role in ensuring compliance, institutional integrity, and alignment with the university's broader academic mission. But there is a whole host of changes and reimagining of how the conference can work with the other stakeholders in the conference as well. So, Brad, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Karen. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
That's great. You and I had a chance to meet a couple of weeks ago in Denver at the Association for Governing Boards conference. Tell me what some of your takeaways were from that those couple of days.
Yeah. So at the AGB conference there in Denver, it was a great opportunity to get away with our board chair for our board of trustees here at Utah State. And I'm fairly new in this position. I've just been on the job a little over 5 months now. And so AGB is just a great organization. They really allow presidents and boards to hear from some of the best and brightest about what's happening in higher education across the board. And so it was a great opportunity for Tessa White, our chair, and me to get away and not only participate in the sessions, but then to have some time together to process and to think about what our strategy might be going forward. But we were really appreciative of the couple of sessions there that focus in on, in addition to innovation in higher education and mergers and partnerships, but the conversations around athletics were some of the ones that really helped us think a little bit differently about this space that we're in right now that you outlined so well a little bit ago.
Yeah, it was great to have you both there. And you were in the midst of some crazy frenetic things going back on campus too, which was kind of, funny in the big scheme of things. But do you want to highlight any of the things that you took away from the athletic sessions that you might want to share with the audience?
Well, in addition to just getting the lay of the land of where things are at with conference realignment and NIL and the transfer portal. One thing that I've brought back and talked to some of our stakeholder groups about is really what the impact is of gambling in college athletics these days and how there are so many threats. People talk about losing the integrity because of NIL and the transfer portal of traditional college athletics. Not to say that that's not a change from the traditional collegiate athletics model. But the threats of gambling are real, and understanding a little bit better some of the, if I can call them shenanigans that are happening out there for people to get information, to buy information just from our regular student body. Nobody is safe. I think that's what you said a couple times, Karen, that we educate our student athletes about all of the activities around sports gambling, but we're not educating the rest of our student bodies, and that's a big area of potential liability as well. So yeah, just really opened our eyes. Plus, especially the one conversation was more of an informal chat with a bunch of folks, and just listening to folks from across different sizes of Division I institutions and different conferences, all kind of struggling with the same things when it comes to negotiating coaching contracts, which is some of the craziness that we were involved in, that you were alluding to while we're there, and negotiating NIL deals and how to kind of work in that landscape. It was a little bit comforting, I guess, to know that other folks are dealing with the same issues and nobody seems to have all of the dots connected and the questions answered.
I really appreciate you sharing those two things because those are two of my strongest takeaways. I really think that most people in the room had no thought about gambling as being as high on the risk index for your campus, not just your athletes. And I agree 100%. I'm oftentimes told, well, this isn't an issue for Division II or Division III. In that smaller group, it very much felt like many of these issues are impacting Division II and Division III. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, it was a really valuable conversation, and just getting a chance to network and and make connections with folks. And, some folks, we've crossed paths with previously, and others are new to the game, and folks from a lot of different backgrounds, from high level kind of corporate experience. So a lot of, at AGB, you get a lot of board members for institutions. So you get some politicians or former politicians there that have some different insights, right? We had a former member of
We
Congress
did.
in one of our discussion groups, and that
Yeah.
was pretty interesting. So it was definitely worth the time from our
Yeah.
perspective to be there.
Yeah, I thought so too. Now you're in your first year, and your AD is in his first year. So what has that process been like for the two of you to navigate not only everything that's going on nationally, but then the transition from one conference to another that I'm pretty sure was decided upon before you got there. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, you're
Okay.
correct. So the decision to transition for Utah State to transition to the Pac-12 was made by the previous president and the previous athletic director, and we had an interim president and an interim athletic director. And now Cam Walker, our new AD, and I are stepping into that deck that was already stacked for us, if you will. Cam actually, inverse to maybe how things happen under normal circumstances, Cam Walker got hired and started the first part of October. I didn't get hired till the end of October and started in November. And so some folks have said, "Oh, aren't you upset that you didn't get to hire the athletic director?" And I guess I could say that, but we have a great athletic director here. I feel
Yeah,
like, and he comes with a lot of experience that's helpful for us to work with the other schools, the other 8 schools that are joining this reimagined Pac-12. And our athletic directors have been meeting, formally at least monthly, but I know there are a lot more conversations happening and with the conference office with Teresa Gould, and really trying to rebuild the staff in the conference office and navigate, everything. Everything is brand new. It's not like we even have a site that we go back to for our basketball tournament, or, what is the season scheduling going to be like in any of our sports. We're just creating it from whole cloth because we all come from different backgrounds and different expectations and for our institutions. So it's a very unique opportunity for us. And
it is.
we want to really establish from the start that the Pac-12 is, a major power player in the field of college athletics, and we have great institutions and great programs, and a unique market in this day where regional alliances don't seem to mean as much. We've been able to maintain that for the most part. So I'm excited for July 1st to come and to officially launch the new conference.
Are your schedules set for next year? Is everything pretty much laid out for your teams?
The fall sports are set. We're still working on the winter sports and things. We do have, this first year we have for our football games, so where we have the 8 football playing schools, if we play everybody once, that only gives us 7 games each. So we're doing something unique that I think will, it gives us, we'll see how it plays out. We know the 4 teams that will host the final game of the season, but those matchups are going to be determined kind of based on where teams are at in the standings and different things, and to see if we need to break any ties as we're heading into a conference championship game and stuff. So that final game is what we're calling a flex game on our schedule, which will be a little bit unique. So we don't know, what all 12 of our matchups are at this point. We only know 11, but that'll be fun for our fans. We're
Yeah,
slated to be at home that final game here in Logan, and we'll be hosting one of the teams in the Pac-12, and we're excited for that.
that's
It's
great.
always fun to play November, Thanksgiving weekend football in Logan, Utah.
Big time. Big time.
It's not whether snow will be a factor, it's how much snow will there be.
Although I heard this winter, Utah did not get much snow. Is
It
that right?
was very mild. We only got 2 or 3 big storms. We did have to cancel afternoon classes one day because we had so much snow here in Logan. But we still played our basketball game that night. I don't know what that says about our priorities.
Well, maybe the students are ready to do that. So that,
Yeah,
sometimes you have to read the landscape, right?
yeah, exactly.
I know that you and your AD are having lots of conversations about revenue generation. And what are you finding overall might be some of the revenue opportunities for you at this point that you didn't have either in the Mountain West before, or because the two of you are thinking differently than previous administration?
Yeah, the media rights contract is better for us in the Pac-12 than it was in the Mountain West, and we're excited about that. But
Okay.
that certainly is not at a level that it's going to really allow us to compete
Okay.
the way we feel like we want to, both as an institution and as a conference. And so I think all of our member institutions are trying to evaluate all the sources of revenue to see what we can do better. We are specifically, we're fortunate to have had some longtime Aggie boosters and donors step up philanthropically with what they're giving to our program. We ask through our processes here in Utah for our Board of Trustees and the State Board of Higher Education to increase student fees. We were asking for a $59 a year increase per student. They approved a $10 per year increase.
Okay.
So there's a big focus on affordability here by our policymakers in the state. At the same time, we wanted to, we're trying to make the case that, what our students attending those games and the community that they build through the herd, as we
Yes.
call our student section, our
Yes.
students talk about it. I was just at a luncheon with some graduating students, and they were talking about how they felt connected to the school because of being part of the herd. So that does play into that overall student life perspective. But nonetheless, we didn't get quite as much as we were hoping for there.
Yeah.
We've changed. We've done. Speaking of the herd, we've moved where they sit a little bit in our basketball arena
I was
to
going to
try
ask you about that. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
to try to provide more courtside premium seating for folks that will hopefully generate some additional revenue. That's our herd leadership. The student leaders supported that change, but that doesn't mean all of the Aggies out there that we aren't hearing about it from some folks on social media. But hopefully we'll still maintain that Spectrum Magic perspective no matter where the herd are sitting. And we did even increase the number of seats they have a little bit. So hopefully that's a good trade-off. But we're also looking at, what can we use our athletic venues for to generate revenue in addition to football, basketball games, gymnastics, and other things, concerts or other community events. We're talking with Logan City to reestablish a fireworks show in July at our football stadium with a concert attached and some of those things. So we're hopeful that and through sponsorships and everything else we can think up at this point, everything's on the table to try to be smarter about the revenue that we bring in. We don't plan to generate the most revenue of any school in the Pac-12, but we're going to be smart about it and then be smart about how we use it and try to get the most bang for our buck.
Yeah. Just give me a sense of your relationship to Logan. Are you kind of the biggest fish in the pond there, or are there other areas of land that are just as big? How does that look?
Yeah, so Logan is a pretty small town, really would be very small without the university. And so we're um, really have a close relationship with Logan City and the Cache County leaders here. Associated with Utah State is the Space Dynamics Laboratory, which isn't a household name, but it's a huge employer for us. It's one of 14 federally designated university affiliated research centers that support the Air Force and Space Command, and they do hundreds of millions of dollars worth of research for the federal government every year. So that's a big deal in town. But everybody in this valley is an Aggie, whether they go to school or not. They kind of live and die by USU football and basketball, and
Yeah.
so there's a lot of community support, a lot of passion, and with that comes a lot of opinions and a lot of feelings. But
Shocked.
we have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder up here from a couple of those allegedly bigger schools along the Wasatch Front at the University of Utah and BYU that compete for the hearts and minds of Utahns everywhere. But we like to think we hold our own.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I also read you've launched the Show Me initiative, which is trying to generate more revenue. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're asking all of those Aggies across the board, no matter where they're at, whether they're a smaller annual donor or one of our larger donors, to evaluate what they can do and to contribute to Utah State athletics. I mean, we made this decision to go to the Pac-12 because we want to compete with the best. And we know there are teams in our conference who have been to Final Fours and been to college football playoffs. And that's where we want Utah State's program to be. Folks, we're going to be accountable for the dollars that we use, but we need more. We're asking folks to show me. That's kind of a play on words from one of our fight songs, Show Me a True-Blooded Aggie from Utah, and that our students sing as part of the herd every game. And everybody knows what that means, that it's time to step up. And so whether they're folks joining our Big Blue Society or other levels of giving, but to really consider stepping up to support their Aggies.
And this has got to be special for you because you're an alumni.
Yes.
Utah State. So, and I did read somewhere where you walk by your classroom that you took classes in as an undergrad every day on the way to your office.
Yes. I mean, USU just has a gorgeous campus, and we have, the traditional old main building where there are a lot of classrooms, but that's where the administration offices too, and it's been that way for 100 years. And so I literally walked by Old Main 115, which is where my first class was at USU 33 years ago, and on my way to Old Main 134, which is my office now. And it's just, I thought I knew what surreal meant, but it's a whole new level of what that
Absolutely.
word is being in this role.
Yeah. So let's talk about your learning curve. You said you're heading to your conference meetings tomorrow, I think, at
Yes.
PAC-12. What's on the agenda and what do you want to hear more about so you can bring it back to campus and try to implement some things?
Yeah, I had the chance to be really heavily involved with our Big Sky President's Council when I was a president at Weber State before, but there is a different level of complexity, both launching a new conference and then just with more significant dollars at play with everything that we do. And so I am still kind of getting up to speed on how we're doing things at the Pac-12, but we're all gathering in Corvallis, and the folks at Oregon State are being very gracious to host us as we get ready to launch on July 1st. So we're still working out, like I said, some of the things around scheduling, some of the things around our branding and how we want to position the conference and talk about ourselves collectively as we launch. We want to have a very strong launch from the get-go so that people will realize that this new Pac-12 is a force to be reckoned with. We're still working on our budget for this upcoming fiscal year. Lisa and her team have really tried to forecast out in a way that allows us to accomplish all that we want to do, but still be very conservative with the financials. And we'll be spending some time to talk about that. And like I said before, we are all still kind of new, coming together with the 5 teams from the Mountain West, the two, kind of legacy Pac-12 schools with Oregon State, Washington State, Gonzaga, and Texas State. So we're all still getting to know each other, and we've built in some time to socialize. And Jayathi is hosting us for dinner at her home Wednesday night, I think. So it'll be good to spend that time together.
Yeah, that's really good. For those who may not be aware, in the difficult breakup for the Pac-12 conference when Washington, USC, and UCLA left and went to the Big Ten, Washington State and Oregon State fought hard to retain the media assets of the Pac-12 network, which way back in the day was the number 2 formed conference network behind the Big Ten. And there were big dreams for the Pac-12 network. They did a different distribution model than the Big Ten. They went more to 7 different campuses versus 1 central location. They tried all kinds of different things. And while it didn't generate the revenue that, I think they were hoping for, you all are trying a new strategy with the assets that have been left behind because the Washington State and Oregon State retained the assets of the Pac-12 media network. I understand you may not know everything, but just tell us a little bit about what that value might bring to the conversations and the awareness that you're trying to create for the new Pac.
Yeah, and this is, I will probably butcher this, but I'll give you my layman's impression, because in January when we met in San Ramon, where our conference headquarters are, that we have an amazing facility with with those assets that were put in place, and we're continuing to try to invest in to keep them top of the line. There are some amazing engineers there, and they were just talking about, you know, we really see it as an opportunity to be, I would call it, a sports broadcasting hub, not just for other collegiate conferences who want to use our studios and other things to, generate their broadcasts, but other types of sporting venues as well. And some of the technology that they're developing, just in terms of the quality of slow motion replays. That was one thing they were bragging about to us back in January, that they had just like kind of cracked the nut on and were excited about. But we see that as an opportunity for the Pac-12 to be a leader in terms of sports broadcasting and streaming and providing access to our fans, not just for our teams, but for other sporting events, and use that to generate some enterprise revenues for the conference and the schools as well. So we have some great staff that have been able to be maintained both on the management side and then the engineers through the transition.
Yeah. I just looking at other conferences, the West Coast, Mountain West, they all put together little packages.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I really do think that we'll be able to offer some really attractive packages and partnerships to others that improve the experience for fans.
So they can develop their brands. Is that something you're looking forward to talking about when you get to Corvallis?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that whether those NIL deals are something that the student athletes are maybe going to pursue on their own, or even if it's some of the institutional revenue sharing that we're providing with them, that we can use those types of production facilities to do some real innovative video content and production. And that's one thing that is on our agenda and that we want to figure out how to be a leader in that space and really generating content for the benefits our student athletes as well.
Yeah. And also, I think it's a great opportunity for storytelling about your campuses, right? Because if you're trying to bring your conference back up to the national conversation, there's nothing better than shared video clips and shared, touching from the heart kind of stories that come from your campuses that get widely shared across all platforms.
Yeah, and every university president thinks they have the best campus in the country.
Of course.
But and we wouldn't be worth our salt if we didn't think that. But
Yeah.
I swear I could tell you 30 stories that I've just seen in the last week and a half as we're getting to the end of the semester and graduation is coming up in a couple weeks. And it's really that time where you celebrate all of the great accomplishments. And I'm really proud to be back at my alma mater and yeah, hopefully we can use some of those resources that have been saved through, the hard fought efforts of Oregon State and Washington State to help promote.
So in our final few minutes, I want to chat a little bit about your growth as a president in this period of time. I know you've been a president before, but it is a different institution than where you were before, and the landscape has shifted even in the last year in athletics as well as higher education. How are you staying abreast and focused on what the mission is for Utah State?
Yeah. Utah State has, as you said in the introduction, you summed it up very nicely. I mean, we're a land grant university, a research run university, and we also have this statewide campus network to provide education in some of the more
Yeah.
rural, underserved areas of Utah. So we have a pretty complex set of goals and objectives that we're working towards. So for me personally, just coming in these first few months, it's really been learning to, and I don't have a research background. I tell our folks all the time, I am not going to be the person who comes up with the next cool technology or the big research grant, but I'm going to be your best advocate and connector to the industry partners or government resources or philanthropists to try to help support those programs. It's been fun for me to, whether it's going on a tour of our dairy facilities, our equine facilities. Water is one of the two or three biggest issues here in the state of Utah as far as being an arid state. And as we continue to grow and develop, water availability is a big deal, and Utah State is at the leading front of that effort. It's touring around our statewide campuses and seeing students coming off the Navajo reservation in the southeastern corner of Utah who really are looking for education to provide that transformative piece for them to be able to support themselves and their families. There's just a lot to learn, but a lot to be proud of. And I think the future is really bright because there are so many opportunities there, and we've got a great team to try to step into that. But it's definitely pushing me. It is helpful having been a president before because you kind of develop your own reflex or decision making
Yeah.
sequences, if you will. Um, when I first became a president at Weber State, I had worked there for 14 or 15 years before becoming president. And so I kind of knew everybody and knew the programs and things, but being in the seat to make the decisions was a challenge for me. And I feel like, although folks won't agree with every decision I make, I know that now, and I know I'm not going to be perfect. And so,
Yeah.
sometimes it's worse not to make a decision than to make a wrong decision and then learn from it. And I
Yeah.
feel like I don't have to learn that part of being a president at USU, but it's more about learning the institution and the opportunities and helping to support that in the best way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what a time to come back to your alma mater, Brad. I am so glad we could spend a few minutes together, just kind of getting the lay of the land, how things have been going for the last few months. I hope you'll come back and maybe in a year or so and give me kind of the update of the first year in the Pac-12 and tell me how it went and what worked, what maybe didn't work, and you guys will look at something else.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure that we'll be doing a lot of that we'll be evaluating things this first year, and some things will go off swimmingly, and other things will say, okay, let's never do that again. But we'll try to learn and adjust and grow, because the landscape is, if we know one thing, the landscape is going to continue to
Oh my
change and
gosh, yes.
evolve faster than we can adapt anyway. So it's going to be a game of trying to stay on our toes and to react appropriately and make good decisions as a group. So I'm excited about that. And of course, if you ever find your way to the Intermountain West and
Yeah,
we'd love to have you and Logan and show you around and give you the firsthand look of what it means to be an Aggie here at Utah State.
I appreciate that, Brad. Great to talk with you.
Thanks so much, Karen.
Okay.